Hello! I would like to say to each and every one of you who are clogging the stream waves, screw you. We're out here trying to avoid the coronavirus, and so are you. And I guess that's why you're inside streaming your different platforms, your Netflixes, your Twitch, and you are not making it easy on all of us because we attempted to stream this live, but unfortunately that did not go very well. The internet died. The actual internet provider just failed us. So there was not enough internet for everyone. And that screwed up our audio, and then we had to reset everything. And so we're here doing it once again after, I guess this is our third attempt.
Yep.
Third time's the charm is what they say. So welcome to the Fall Book Club. My name is Maverick Evans, and we will be guiding you today through chapters 5 through 12 of The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. So if you would be so kind as to grit grab your grit out your hymnals. All right, so we're gonna jump right into it because we've covered this material several times ourselves, but you guys haven't seen it. So we want you guys to not miss out on any part of the story. We want you to have everything. So we're gonna do our best to cover it all in its entirety, and we'll give you the best that we possibly can. Chapters 9 through 12 will be especially good because we haven't talked about those with each other yet. So let me grab my little handy dandy laptop here, and we will dig right into chapter 5. Okay, so he's walking around at night, the time traveler is, and when he's scanning around, he suddenly sees that his time machine is missing. So he just bolts out. He starts running. He sprints 2 miles in a very, very slim time of 10 minutes. He runs like an absolute champ, and whenever he gets there, he finds nothing. He can't find it at all, so he searches the surrounding bushes and ends up sobbing in them at one point. No cigar. He runs into one of the houses of the Eloi. He pretty much accosts them and tries to get info out of them as to where his time machine has gone because he hasn't seen anybody else in this world or this time and place, in this place and time. And so they don't tell him anything because they don't speak the same language, and I don't think that they know anything either. So his attempt is unsuccessful. He cries himself to sleep outside on the turf, so that's a slightly depressing little moment there. And he wakes up with a more clear head, starts banging on the bronze doors below the Sphinx head, and he scares all the Eloi watching him, which are the little people, by the way, in case we didn't get you in on that. The Eloi are the little people that we've encountered here. The little nymph or cherub-like characters. He calms down and gives it a few days to think it over, which is a good amount of time. This is high rank type stuff, and so the time traveler ends up saving a young Eloi girl named Weena from drowning while she was swimming in a river. And she becomes highly devoted to him. The time traveler then wakes up during early dawn after meeting her and witnesses what he thinks are ghosts, small white lanky type creatures malinking spider-like humanoid white ape things malinking their way across the horizon and the landscape. He doesn't know what they are. He thinks that they're ghosts, maybe. And then suddenly one appears very close to his face and confronts him. And so this is a major fright to both of them. And after that interaction, that creature runs and scampers off away and goes down into some kind of hole in the ground. And the traveler attempts to make sense of what just happened. He presses Weena for information about what these things are. He asks the Eloi what they are, and all that they can tell him is that they are called Morlocks. That's all he gets. And then after that, he theorizes about what evolution took place in order to split the human race into two different categories, Morlock and LOI. And so that ends chapter 5. This was a terrifying chapter for me. Because whenever we went into this chapter, it's full-blown horror movie all the way. And I was like racing, my heart was like
Yeah.
Like whenever the Morlock pops his head out and is like
Yeah, it scared him. Yeah, I definitely would have been terrified.
Oh yeah.
One, he loses his way out of this place, that now he's discovering that there are predators there in this one seemingly perfect place, and I think he's like really scared. So I would definitely kind of freak out too if that were happening to me.
Oh yeah.
Oh, I wouldn't be able to cope. Like, he thinks rationally through this whole thing. So we always see H.G. Wells just like really pull out this scientific mind where he's like theorizing everything and thinking about it. I would have just had a meltdown like right then and there. I'd be like, I don't even know what I'm gonna do.
Yeah, that's one of the good things to categorize the time traveler as is that, like, because I study a lot of psychology and stuff, and so like the scientific mind is well looked up to and it's aspired toward, because it's hard to achieve the more objective viewpoint of the world in a way that will treat you well. And so for the time traveler to be able to really be rational in almost all of these situations, like as rational as his physical being will let him be, you know, because as far as like your adrenaline controls you and all kinds of other things that, you know, possess you, like all the Romans thought that there were like different gods that controlled like war and stuff, which was really just a rage that would fill you and all kinds of stuff. He seems to be in control of himself quite a bit in all of these different situations, and we get to see that even more in the future chapters, because he does some stuff that I know for a fact I would never do in a million years.
And he finds a companion in this chapter, which is like super important towards our plot line. So like he's all alone in this desolate place, and they basically, all the little people, they swim and they play all day, and they're swimming in this like river kind of thing, which we think is the Thames, right?
Yeah.
Which was it's probably the English river, the Thames. Anyway, so
Maybe.
they're swimming in it.
It might have been long enough to where like new rivers or channels developed.
That's
Could
true.
be.
He
says
references
that the Thames
it
is there,
so
though.
often though.
Yeah, is that what he calls it?
Yeah.
He calls it the Thames?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And so,
But he says it's moved.
and then it's
Interesting.
and it's farther away than where it was away from his house, I guess. Yeah. So basically, he sees them all playing and swimming, and little Weena is swimming, and she gets taken away by this current that basically like anybody who was like good at swimming, had any kind of skill level, could have fought off by themselves. But she gets swept away, and everybody's just still playing and laughing, and he's like, guys, like, so he goes and he rescues her. And since then, she is his undying best friend forever. She's gonna follow him to the ends of the earth.
His BFF.
His BFF.
Yeah,
Yes.
honestly.
Yeah.
She's always like walking around and putting flowers in his pockets, and she's like,
Yeah, just
dancing
little
around
laughing,
him.
her little.
You know, maybe she sounds like a Animal Crossing character.
Really?
Like maybe that's what they sound like. That's like
Like sim talk.
yeah,
Yeah, I was thinking Simlish.
Yay.
That's what the little LOIs sound like.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So, okay, so that's pretty much chapter 5. And if we're brief on these chapters, forgive us, because we have covered them thrice now. So,
Yes.
so we're attempting to dig into them as well as we can, but it won't truly get juicy until chapter 9. So,
Yes.
Yeah.
so bear with us. Also, in case you were wondering, that's Doodle Rin. So
Yes.
Oh yeah, we
Doodle
didn't
Rin.
explain Doodle Rin.
yeah,
in
that's
this.
Doodle Rin. So Rin is gone. He's a little under the weather today, not with the coronavirus, hopefully.
Yes.
But he's a little sick, so we have Doodle Rin here with us. Wish him well. And just another like side thing, just a break. If you guys want to purchase a book to follow along with us, we have links in the description below. If you purchase one of those books with the Amazon link, a portion of that sale will go toward our cause. So it'll help the book club purchase more books and stay afloat. So we'd really like that. And also to make some different upgrades. So we appreciate that. We're going to go ahead and start with chapter 6.
The most terrifying chapter.
Yes, the scariest one.
It is. This is like the horror began in chapter 5 and then it really comes alive in chapter 6.
Yes.
So the time traveler decides to investigate the underground tunnels and so climbs down them. He climbs for a long time and the tests... I haven't fixed this. I'm so illiterate. I have like such terrible typos in my notes and I keep reading them. So he climbs down the tunnel for a very long time. Yeah. So long, in fact, that whenever he finds a landing to rest and lay down, he immediately falls asleep from exhaustion.
Yeah, and it's like a little subjunct of the tunnel. So the tunnel's coming down and it's like a little...
Man, it feels like he has, what's it called, narcolepsy? Where you just fall asleep?
Yes.
He's always falling asleep. Literally, I've said this every time, in the most inconvenient places. He's like near death, and he's like, gotta go to sleep. He's like, I'm in this strange tunnel where I saw these horrifying creatures go. Better take a nap.
Yeah. Right, exactly. And we don't know what the time traveling had an effect on him. It may, like jet lag has a terrible effect on other people, makes them really sleepy. This time traveling might have had a negative effect on him in the same way. And then
gave him narcolepsy.
Yeah, and then like you were saying, he's only eating fruits. It's hotter there, so if it's warmer climate, you might be more prone to fall asleep.
Yeah.
And he's English. He's not used to that.
Exactly. He's English, so it's particularly hot. It probably is very warm for him.
Man, warm in England is probably like 75 degrees. They think any temperature that's not 60 is extreme.
That's funny.
Brooke went to uni in England, so she's the authority in the room. On this.
I would see people wearing like 3 coats. Like I would look out my window and see people wearing like their biggest coats from their closet, and I would go outside in like just a long sleeve shirt and I'd be like, it's kind of toasty out here. This one guy, when it was 80 degrees, he was wearing a full corduroy outfit, corduroy jacket, corduroy pants, both black, and a long sleeve t-shirt.
Oh my gosh.
And I was like, you want to take off that jacket? He was like, nope. I'm a little cold.
Terrible. That's always like, I see in movies like a lot of people wearing like jackets and stuff like that, and I'm like, why would they? It's sunny. It's not overcast at all. It's just sun. Why are you wearing this leather jacket? I don't understand it.
Yeah.
Or like people, even in like real life, people wearing varsity jackets all the time. It's really sad though too, because people down south, like my buddy lives in San Antonio. Back when we were in high school, he didn't have a time. Like it was like 3 weeks out of the year that he could wear his varsity Letterman jacket. And so he would just wear it anyways because he wanted the clout, and like the experience of having like a Letterman jacket, but it was just way too warm.
Yeah.
So he just sweated out.
Oh my gosh.
That's what British people do, but they get defensive about their weather. Like you go over there and you're like, hey, it never really gets cold here. Like it gets like 50 degrees. And then they're like, no, it's cold. It's cold a lot. And they'll get like so defensive about it. And you're like, nope, it doesn't really get that cold.
Doesn't get anything there.
Yeah, and they'll like be so mad. It's like a temperate.
It's dreary.
Yeah. It's like 60 degrees plus or minus 10.
It's always dreary, right?
Time. Yeah, it's pretty overcast, but sometimes there will be like sun.
Yeah, so if you were accustomed to a dreary land that was kind of cool most of the time.
Yeah, now it's sunny.
I feel like it leans toward cool over there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool most of the time. It's like a good solid temperature.
A fair breeze.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so he's used to that, and he falls asleep immediately in exhaustion as soon as he gets onto the landing from the tunnel, and he is abruptly awoke by grappling hands and rustling of the pale creatures. He yells at them in an attempt to get some kind of desirable reaction, But they just end up grabbing him more and more aggressively, which forces him to light a match and escape back the way he came. So this is a very unsettling chapter.
Yeah.
One, because he's going into enemy territory, and not just enemy territory, but like the creepiest territory of all time.
Yeah, doesn't know anything about them. Just sees one of them go down this dark well, and he's like, better follow him.
Yeah, so he's going down, and Weena doesn't want him to go down.
Yeah.
She's freaking out and like tugging on him and crying, and he just starts climbing down, and he's just saying like I could imagine going down a ladder, like how bad his back and shoulders
It's also
hurt.
a small ladder because they're smaller people. So imagine a ladder made for like children.
Yeah.
And so you're like,
I know he's like
cramped
grabbing
on it, and you're like,
yeah. It was really bad. And then he goes and he falls asleep in that tunnel, and he said he can feel like cold hands wake him up, like touching him, and they're kind of doing their creepy whisper voices. And so he lights a match, and he can see two of them in this tunnel, and he's like, and they run away. And so of course his natural reaction is like, I'm gonna follow them. So he goes down this tunnel, and he goes into this bigger room, and I guess that's just where they all live.
there's like a lot of machinery.
Yes, and there's a lot of machinery, and he's lighting the matches just over and over again so he can see until they burn down. And as he's doing that, they're encroaching upon him. So I was talking to Brooke earlier about how they were like the angels off of Doctor Who. So like the angels, if you look away from them, they come at you. So like you have to keep your eyes on them all the time. And so that's what I imagine. It's just like every time he's lighting the match, they're closer and closer and closer. And so they start touching him. Oh, one, he describes the smell. So like they have this foul odor about them.
Yeah.
But he smells blood. And he sees a table, like this marble table that has meat on it. And so he's like, oh, they're carnivorous. But he also thinks like to himself later, he's like, I haven't seen any animals here. Yeah.
So I don't know what they're eating.
Yeah. So, So he's going down there, and he knows that they have machines, whatever. Then they start to tug on him more aggressively, and he gets mad and he yells at them. They kind of back up, but then they just don't even care. They start pulling on him, and he crawls into the second tunnel, and they pull his shoe off.
Yeah.
Right? And he's trying to get away, and finally he climbs up the tunnel, gets out, collapses on the ground, and he's so glad because it smells so nice and earthy and fresh there, and Weena's all there to like caress him, and he's just like, oh my gosh. And he narrowly escaped with his life. So that was like the whole like thing about it. And he discovers that basically there are carnivorous creatures living underneath in the tunnels, and so that really plays into his theories in the next chapter.
Yes, which brings us to chapter 7. So, in chapter 7, as soon as the time traveler escapes the tunnel, he falls asleep again. So he didn't have a sufficient nap down in the tunnels. I'm sure it didn't last very long, maybe 5 minutes before the Morlocks were on him. And he rests there with Weena, and then once he wakes up again, he attempts to find some sort of refuge or safety from the Morlocks, but can't find any such refuge. He takes Weena alongside him and begins traveling toward a place called the Palace of Green Porcelain, but grows weary before laying down yet again in an open field to rest. Weena sleeps on him as he gazes up at the stars and reconsiders his theory of these creatures' evolution and plans for his next move toward escape from this place and time.
Yes.
So this is, again, we had accused this before of being some sort of filler, but I would disagree and say that it was more of an opportunity for the time traveler's intellect to shine, more of an opportunity for him to theorize in depth and give like 3/4 of the chapter toward his theories.
Yeah.
And that's mostly what I feel like this chapter serves as.
And it kind of points out, so we notice at the very beginning he has a bloody sock, his feet are bleeding, and So this is
he
when
lost his boot.
He loses one boot, and the other shoe, he says that they're just comfy lounging shoes that he wears, and he's been stuck in this environment. And so now his only shoe that he has, instead of kicking it off, there's a nail coming out, and he's stabbing him in the foot. So he's just trudging through all of this and collapses, and he's realizing that there's like a sliver of the moon. So he's realizing now that, okay, the Eloi are scared of the dark. Why are they scared of the dark? Oh, these creatures come out in the dark. I bet they come out during the new moon, like to raid or attack them or whatever, because they are extremely sensitive to light, which we've noticed with all the matches, which he has used up. He has no more matches, and he's laying on this open field because he feels more safe there with her, and he starts to think, okay, what are these underlings for versus like the Eloi? Like, what's the importance of them, and why are they there? So this gets a little intense, honestly.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of like classism. So he basically says that like the Eloi are like this perfect like people, and honestly what I think they're like a product of eugenics. So like basically in this utopian society, we already discussed how like, you know, they have no problems, they have nothing going on with them, so they're a byproduct of a utopia. So they have this aristocracy, and then they have the Morlocks underneath, who were the servers. So basically the Morlocks at one point ran out of a food source, and so what do? They start snatching Eloi from the top, from the surface, and feasting on their flesh.
Yeah, and that's what he immediately has this realization that the slab of meat that he saw on the stone down into the tunnels was not just any meat, or not belonging to some animal that he had not been able to see so far, but instead belonged to an Eloi.
Yeah.
Eloi. So that's a good idea, though. I like that idea that it was a result of eugenics. We haven't talked about that
I
yet.
thought about that, how perfect and beautiful they were, and kind of like how that went. And so I really kind of thought, you know, this must be a product of like eugenics, basically. Like, you know, you're breeding out different things, different traits or strengths.
It seems like it would be, yeah.
And yeah, so that's why I think they all look the same, they all sound the same, they don't grow, you know, and we're not really seeing old ones because I don't think they live that long. So he compares them to cattle. So he's basically saying that the Eloi or Eloi, whatever, that's killing me. I don't know. I'm honestly on the fence about which one I want to say.
I feel like Eloi.
Eloi, I like it.
I keep saying
Aloha.
Eloi.
Yeah.
Eloi.
So he says that they're cattle, and they're just being bred by the Morlocks, which I'm still even with what I already know, I'm still on the fence with the intelligence of the Morlocks.
So I think that he is underestimating the Morlocks' intelligence. As of now, he says that like he thinks that they're making the clothes and the shoes because they've just been conditioned to do it, and so they're not really thinking about it. But I think they are, because of what happens in later chapters. And I think they are doing the things they do purposefully.
That's a big conjecture.
Yeah.
I think he is underestimating their intellect, but I think that every time he underestimates them, it just so happens to not be his downfall. But for anyone else that isn't with his extraordinary ability, like time travel or intellect, they would fall into their trap. Because who the hell would think about these little creatures, you know, having half a brain? Yeah. You know, and they definitely do have a little bit of capability. We see later on really good examples of that. Yes. So yeah, and you know, your theory, Riley, fits in really well with it fits in interestingly with his conjecture about communism being the result of all of this. So eugenics fits in well with that idea. Yes. And so yeah, so where
this is an important part.
Okay.
So Weena at this point is putting flowers in his pocket.
Yes.
And
that's a cute one.
So she's putting flowers in his pockets because she thinks that they're vases to put flowers in. And right in the middle of him telling this room full of men, he takes out the white flowers and he sets them on the table.
This is also the first time that it's taken you out of the narrative of his time-traveling adventure and brings you back to the room. This is the only time in the entire story he does it.
Yes.
And it's for the purpose of showing the one piece of evidence that he has about it. These wilted white flowers.
Yes. And to speak with future perspective, these flowers are a good example of like Chekhov's principle, which is that you don't put a rifle on the wall unless, of course, you will use it in the second act. Don't put a rifle on the wall in the first act if you don't intend to use it in the second. And these flowers are pulled out very purposefully. This is I feel like the literary version of like a film close-up.
Ooh, yeah.
Right? So like
foreshadowing.
Exactly. Yeah. We're breaking the veil here. This is costing a lot. Cost a lot to break the veil with this narration, because up until now I personally had forgot that we were in a narration.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, we're so consumed in the story, you know.
That I had completely considered, the time traveler's life up in the air. And I hadn't ever gave it another thought where I was like, well, he's narrating the story, so there's no way that he could have died in this situation. Every moment was high stakes, life or death.
Yes.
I don't know if the time traveler will make it out or not.
Yeah.
And so for H.G. Wells to really consider this moment and these objects to be of such importance that they needed to be established early on, or at least midway through the book, were very important.
Yeah,
So,
there was a point to him pulling them out then and not later. Like being like, oh, I remember I have these flowers, puts them on the table at the end.
because he needed to establish that right then and there the flowers meant something to him, like when he received them.
And in this chapter, it does explain how old he is. So it says that he thinks about the cycles of the earth, and it says only 40 times had the silent revolution occurred during all the years I had traversed.
He's 40.
He's only 40.
He's 40.
Yeah. I knew it somehow.
Hey, I said early 40s.
Yeah, I knew
too.
he was in his 40s, and he had this gray hair and like lines and stuff. So good job. I'm so proud of myself for remembering.
Good job, Riley.
Okay, so here's a question. Here's a funny question. Do you guys think that the time traveler is a gray fox?
Like handsome?
Yeah.
Yes.
Like real handsome?
I would say
yeah.
I mean, he's got to be a
George
little
Clooney.
I think he has to be pretty handsome. Like I think of like a George
but he's
Clooney
single.
or something.
Don't take my joke, Maverick.
Did you say that?
I said George Clooney.
Just
Get
now.
out of here.
She just said it.
Yeah, but I didn't make a joke. I'm saying George Clooney's handsome.
He is.
Yeah,
so
Maverick,
handsome.
get out.
Is he actually considered the gray fox?
Yes.
What's the joke? Explain it to me.
No, I was saying that George Clooney is the one everyone talks about whenever they're like, oh, he's a hot old man.
I guess that's why.
true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
You
I
said
think
it right after me, acting like it was your own idea.
He can't be like too awful, but also he's not married, which is really weird for the time.
But he also seems
Maybe
very...
he is, and his wife is just kept away in a cupboard or whatever. But
I don't think he is.
I don't think
seems
he is.
very infatuated with his own research.
With his
than
own
he
work.
would be with a
and he has a housemaid.
woman.
A
Maybe
whammon.
he's
He's
like
like a Sherlock character where he's like.
Well, yeah, that's what I
so
had said
into
in
his-
our first session, was that he reminds me a whole lot of Sherlock.
Yeah.
Like that kind of like high intellect
Yeah.
Englishman, that just knows how to deal with everything, no
Yes.
matter what the problem is.
Yeah.
So he said that this is when he starts to realize like that this is the downfall of humanity, that he's seeing humanity in its end stages. So he's thinking like, oh, this is it. Like this is like what we've left, like the world. So we have these nasty beasts and the Eloi, like, and that's it.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing else left of humanity. And how disheartening that was for him, because he expected to see like these great triumphs of technology,
Yeah.
and just like massive growth. And
I think he went a little too far for that.
yeah, I think that he would have seen it, which we'll see in the next chapter.
Right.
Yeah.
So that was just his
I
like.
think if he went like 500 years in the future, he would have seen some
Boom. Okay.
crazy stuff.
If someone watches this, I want you to know that breakfast means break your fast. Like, break fast. Because you've been fasting all night when you're sleeping. And you break it when you eat in the morning.
Yes.
That blew me away.
Your mind.
And no, because I wasn't the only one who didn't know that, because when I was explaining it to my friends this past week, they were like, what? For real? And I'm like, yeah.
I'm sure most people don't know that.
I'm real big on like word roots and like suffixes and prefixes and like Latin roots and stuff. So I knew that one. And but when I did find that one out when I was young, I used it all the time.
Yeah.
I was like trying to break my fast.
Ooh.
How cool am I for using this word?
And then he talks about how basically he has sympathy for the Eloi because they're too human-like. They're very human-like in their affection and their like presence and their looks. Where he's at this point where he's disgusted by the Morlocks. He hates them.
But he thinks that if he had met the Morlocks first and they had been a little bit more humanoid, they would have been the ones that he hung around.
Yeah.
Yeah, if they hadn't tried to kill him.
Yeah.
True.
And everything. But yeah, that's he recognizes, first of all, he makes that stretch to try and like reach out with like his superior humanity to these Morlock creatures, because he realizes that they're from the same branch of genes, so like they evolved from humans.
I think that's why he was more comfortable going in the tunnel in the last chapter, because he was like, all right, well, maybe I'll check this out.
Yeah.
But
he also knows he's bigger than them, so he probably didn't think of them as like a pack of animals. They'll all work together to take him down, because he's like, the Eloi, I can just pick up 5 of them and like toss them across a field if I want to.
Which he almost does a few times.
Yeah.
So
that's the funny thing. And it just says like, it's basically, it just ends with
him going to sleep.
Him.
Basically.
Yeah, him fall.
He falls asleep and then he wakes up.
He wakes up, they have their breakfast, and then they start their march towards the Green Palace? Is that what it's called?
The green porcelain palace.
The Palace of Green Porcelain.
Yes.
Say that 5 times fast.
The Palace of Green Porcelain.
I don't know. Say it 5 times fast, Maverick. Not just 1 time slowly.
Oh, the Palace of Green Porcelain, 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 the Palace of Green Porcelain.
Oh.
I almost messed up.
Slick tongued.
You
Yeah.
almost said porcelain, but that's okay.
Porcelain.
That's insulin
Free
for
now.
porn stars.
Premium, free now. Okay.
My sugar's getting
So we've now moved into chapter 8. The time traveler wakes up, has his breakfast with Weena. He breaks his fast, and they take off to go find the Palace of Green Porcelain, which turns out to be a massive museum. They go inside and realize that the Morlocks are near. The time traveler finds a weapon and some matches to defend himself.
And camphor.
And camphor.
Very important.
Very important. Camphor. Which, for those of you who do not know, is not combustive, but is
highly flammable.
Highly flammable.
It's like a wax.
Yes, it's like a wax. A droopy wax.
It is not liquid.
It's a semi-liquid. It would droop.
It's like Vicks.
It's wax.
Yeah.
That's what I imagine it as.
Yeah, it's like
Vicks
almost like a gel.
Rub.
Yeah.
He attempts to create a kind of explosive, but only succeeds in finding a flammable substance, camphor. He is excited to kill some Morlocks, despite them technically being human.
Yeah.
And that is chapter 8.
Yes, it is. Oh, and he sets on to go get his time machine.
Sees the forest, and he's like, I'm going to go in there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and then
well,
we
they
get
had...
into chapter.
He hears... So they make their way into this museum, and then when they do, the entire floor is covered in about 1 inch or 2 or 3 inches of dust.
Yeah.
And that like softens their step. That was kind of a big portion of it.
Mm-hmm.
And as they make their way through, he sees all kinds of different jewel boxes, different glass boxes that look very similar to the items that were during his
fossils.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, different fossils. And he's recognizing these fossils, which I just think is so amazing how smart H.G. Wells is, because he's naming actual fossils.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like he's doing like their actual genus types. And he starts to actually name minerals and just a bunch of different things. So he's thinking, I mean, I think that the scientist does go in there like in hopes that he can find something that he can fight off the Morlocks with.
Yeah.
So he goes in there with kind of hope to destroy them, which he does eventually find. So he looks and he sees sulfur, and in his mind he's thinking, he's like, oh, I can make gunpowder. Mm-hmm. But he can't find any nitrates because he says they're all probably liquefied by now.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of stuff that he finds.
He finds some dynamite and he tosses it down the hallway, but it doesn't go off. And he's like, I was going to use that to close those doors.
Obviously.
And then he's like, wait, I have a crowbar. Why would I need dynamite?
Yeah.
He's like, I can just use this.
He's like, I would have broke my time machine doing that.
Yeah.
So he wanted something to pry open the brass doors and like beat open the brass doors that are underneath the Sphinx. But he goes under there and he's seeing just the decay of humanity. That's really what it, like, the decay of intelligence. So he...
Rotting books and everything.
Well, like, this society doesn't care about knowledge anymore or intellectual things.
This is
or
the third time
history.
that he's had this thought process. The first time was when he first got there and he met the Eloi and he realized that nature, the inquisitive nature of humanity is vanished.
Yeah.
And then he had a second realization in the previous chapter when he was laying in the field looking at the stars, contemplating the further degradation of humanity, that not only had they turned into Eloi, but they had turned into Morlocks as well. And that now they're just in a very natural animal ecosystem among themselves. They are true to their nature, and as such are now animals. And then we have this third one where he's presented with physical evidence of the downfall of humanity and the human intellect that he and so many other people had worked and dedicated their entire lives to. He mentions in this chapter specifically that he himself had published 11 papers.
Yeah.
And that he had contributed directly to the intellect of man, and that this is the result of it all.
Oh, that'd be so sad. That'd be disappointing.
Or to think that anything, and we do have, I mean, it is stark, and it is something that we have to think about. So, you know how they say, like, in 3 generations from now, like, we're going to be forgotten. So, like, us. So, well, we won't live on in other people's memories, but books always survive. They survive familial generations, even if we don't, like, make a huge impact, you know. So books and literature, you know, we always think like, well, they'll survive. People will maintain that. But, you know, this is 80,000 years in the future, however long it is, you know, it's gone. Everything that all these people have worked so hard for is rotten on the floor. Nothing. And he says he's just so sad about it.
Yeah.
And then he begins to look in kind of this machine room, and he sees like this handle. This bar handle.
Well, he looks for this because he hears the pattering and the rustling of the Morlocks.
And that's what we notice, is that there's dust all around this place, and the only place there isn't dust is in this room. And he notices that first, and he's like, it's not really that dusty in here. And then he looks, and at the end of the hall, he hears their feet and their little like I just
I think there's
giggling.
like I think a portion of the building had sunk in, and that then went into their cavernous area.
Yeah,
and so that was like
it was on a hill.
Yeah, their big descent area. So it was just a massive tunnel for where the Morlock travel area.
Yeah, and I think that's what really sets him on this impending doom. So he gets the handle, then he goes and he sees in this case these preserved matches, and he's like, yes, I got it. And then he finds the dynamite and he goes, Eureka! Like, he's so excited that he found the dynamite, and he threw it and he goes, of course they'd be duds. Why would they keep real dynamite in a museum? And
man, that'd be awesome if they did, though.
But it's so funny how you see his like humanity, so like his flaws and judgment. So like he's sitting there and he's like, well, I couldn't possibly use dynamite to like blow up, because I could blow up my time machine, I could hurt myself. I'm kind of glad the dynamite didn't work out. And so and then he finds camphor.
Yeah.
So he finds all those, and I'm pretty sure that he's going to use the camphor to, burn stuff or keep, at least in my mind, I would be making a torch so like I could hold it.
I think that's what he was thinking about. Yeah. But so whenever, are we done with chapter 8?
Nearly.
Almost done.
We're almost done. The end of chapter 8.
He wants to kill the Morlocks super bad.
Yeah, yes. He just really wants to kill them. Like, he's like so excited. He has like his lead pipe in his hand. He can feel the weight, and he's like,
I'm gonna kill some Morlocks with this.
He reminds me of like in the movie The Warriors or something, just carrying around his like lead pipe, just like, ooh yeah, I'm about to lay this down into somebody. Eureka, by the way, is a Greek word. It means heureka, meaning I have found it. Said to have been uttered by Archimedes when he hit upon a method of determining the purity of gold. Yes. So that's the definition of eureka. Fun fact.
Nice.
Yeah. So whenever he uses it, like pretty fittingly, I have found it.
Yeah. So I feel like he did think about making a torch, but I think he wanted to save the camphor for like an emergency,
because I mean it would make sense that you needed this bright burning material, because these creatures, like, their main vulnerability is that they can't stand the light, and so their eyes are huge, it blinds them, it's really important. So I think it's so fortunate, I mean, that he found it. Obviously it's written in there that way, but like it's just he would have, okay, let's say if, like, one of the people went in there, like one of his dinner party guests, and just hopped on the time machine and ended up there, like, they might not have the presence of mind to say, oh, camphor.
I wouldn't know how to get out of there. Was.
Yeah.
I wouldn't pick it up. I'd pick up a gun and think that it would work.
Well, this is, like, an interesting thing that we'll be able to compare to the last chapter, which is his state of mind.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we've already recognized and brought to light the fact that he is thinking very much like a scientist, with a scientific point of view and with a more objective perspective. And so I think also that he's just in a really prolonged form of shock, almost.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like his psyche or his body has adapted to this immense impossibility.
Like stress.
Right. Well,
yeah,
he's time
kind
traveled
of in go
now.
mode.
Yeah, he's in go mode. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. He's in go mode. And like, he is time traveled, he's encountering new creatures, his life is put at risk, he is having to problem solve after problem solve and do it under stress and under time constraints and with threats all around him. And so I think his body and his mind has no option but to just take it all in as it is. Like, there's no other option but to solve these issues, because if we don't, we die. And so we see him come out of that later on. So we'll get to contrast that later. So we've ended with chapter 8, which chapter 8 ends with him just really thinking about how many Morlocks he's going to murder.
Yeah.
He has since then dispensed with the idea that it's kind of sad that they're humans and that it would be bad to kill them, and he's kind of gone away from that perspective and just said, I want to kill them. Chapter 9 begins. The time traveler and Weena decide not to stick around the Green Museum and leave for the Sphinx. They go to the porcelain Sphinx, and traveling through the forest at night, the Morlocks close in on them, and the time traveler must stave them off by starting a campfire. The traveler blinks and then instantly awakes at the Morlocks attempting to kill him. He had fallen asleep yet again. What an idiot! He fights them off with the mace that he had got from the museum, and then they all flee. He realizes it because it is because of a fast-growing forest fire behind him. That's why they flee away from him. He attempts to find Weena and his box of matches, but can't, and so evades the fire. The Morlocks scurry around blind, pained, and confused. Weena is nowhere to be found. The time traveler feels as if all is lost, but then finds a few matches in his pocket. There is hope yet. So that is chapter 9.
Yes. So he starts off, and it says that, you know, he's at the wood, and he's trying to, like, he's going through all this shrubbery, and he says, you know, he has a sense of impending calamity that should have served me as a warning, but it drove him onward. So he just keeps going through all this, and he's just exhausted, and Weena's getting exhausted, and he's like, we have to stop. So he said basically he felt like he had been 2 days without sleep for him, or at least a good sleep, and he felt it coming onto him, and with that the Morlocks too. So basically he knew that he needed to make a campfire, so he gets the camphor and he like smears it on there, builds up a campfire, which Weena's like amazed by.
Yeah, she's loving it.
She's loving it, and he's like, I had to hold her back because she was gonna jump into it.
Yeah. They like don't know what fire really is, and so they just think, oh, it looks so cool, I should jump in this.
Well, I'm not joking. Little kids are like, have you heard about the thing? It's like kids don't know that something's bad until, they touch a hot stove, and then they're like, oh, that's hot.
Well, I think
so they have to learn their lesson. So
yeah.
It's like the same thing for her.
Well,
She's a child.
I think it's the same with the Morlocks too, because later they're just jumping in the
Well,
fire.
they do that in this chapter.
It is in this chapter.
They're running around.
They're like running into the fire. Just
because they don't even know what it is.
Yeah,
I don't think
so
they realize
he
it.
makes the campfire, campfire, and then he falls asleep. Like, he just blinks, and he's immediately asleep.
again.
And Weena, he says that, like, they're closing around her, and Weena passes out. Like, he can't revive her. Do you guys remember that?
So that's after the forest catches on fire.
Okay.
I think it was smoke inhalation that like
knocked him out.
No, knocked her out, and he couldn't tell if she was breathing, so I think the smoke killed her. And so he gets turned around because of the Morlocks, and so he doesn't know where she was, and so she gets left in the fire.
I like how it was like he's carrying all this stuff, and he goes, in my right arm I had my iron bar, and in my left arm I had my little one. He's like carrying her through the woods like that, and that's when I was like, yeah, this is like a father-daughter thing to me, like where he's like, this is my little one, I'm gonna take her with me forever, and he wants to take her, which we find out that that's not a possibility, and that doesn't happen, which is tragic, but also Weena could not have survived in the future.
No.
Well, I don't know. I think there is like a lot of possibility. I think that
she
all
would
of
have been
these
a sideshow.
She wouldn't have known what anything
people in the 1800s
was.
were ruthless.
But I don't think that the time traveler would have allowed that to happen.
How could he have prevented that? Like, people are crazy.
Well, but mostly because like there were already like circus sideshows and stuff. No one believes in them. They're just like, different like deformed people.
I think she would have been exploited. And
she would have been put in like.
I think it's more of a modern
shows.
Perspective to say that they would have been like poked and prodded by like federal government.
Man, this is in the 1800s.
Yeah,
though.
I think he would have been able to keep her, because no one would have wanted her.
I think they would have tried to dissect her and like do whatever.
I feel like in the 1800s it was a lot more like now, or like even in the late 1900s and stuff, it'd be more like, you're an outcast, you're gross, get away from me.
Yeah.
But I think in the 1800s it would have definitely been more like the government shows up at your door and they're like,
maybe
that's my property now.
Maybe. I don't think so. Because, like, what are they
by
trying
order
to...
of the queen.
Do they try and dissect...
By order of the queen, we need to take her.
My name's Robert Falcon Scott. I'm here. I'm dead in the... Okay, well... I don't know.
It's Robert... How he does it. Robert Falcon Scott with a big voice. And his hands on his hips.
Yes. That was a fun plan. I saw a woman today that told me, she's like, I feel like I've seen you somewhere. And I was like, I was just in Peter and the Starcatcher. And she was like, yes.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You're famous.
Yeah.
Wow,
So,
you're
no, I don't know about all that. I guess I feel like the LOI have a lot of potential just from what I've seen Weena be able to do.
So you think that she has the capability to grow?
Yeah, and because I think that they're just like in a permanent childish state. But I mean, she's already been able to adapt so far.
And
I think the biggest issue that you would run into bringing her into the human world is probably her reproductive system. I don't know how she would further her gene
I don't think she would be
I don't
able
think
to.
she
Right,
would.
I don't think so either. So that would be the biggest issue. I don't think after, like, if you were able to like have her have children and then have them grow up over the course of like another 100 years, maybe they might find another homeostasis with humans, you know, or maybe something else. I don't know. So he
has to start up his fire, all that. Then the thing happens, the fire.
Yeah.
Which happens, like, I think after he falls asleep, he wakes up to it.
Because he's trying to get the Morlocks away from him, and he accidentally sets the whole forest on fire.
Yeah, and he wakes up to that, and he's like, he saw that his little fire went out, right?
Yes.
So he passed out, and I totally get that. I mean, he's been walking barefoot, carrying things, like ripping things up, trying to, like, he's been exerting so much energy, and he's only eating carbs. Like, that's like,
all he's eating is fruit.
Yeah, just sugar.
Just like fiber and sugar. Yeah.
There's like nothing in there for him, so he's fatigued. Yeah. I don't blame him for falling asleep. I think that's like a natural thing for people to do whenever they're like under a lot of stress, is to just pass out. And he says he just blinks, which I don't know if you've ever had a sleep like that, but I have. Like, where you're just like blipping in and out. One time I had to stay up all night because one of my friends was having a baby. And I stayed up all night for the baby being born till like 6, 7 in the morning. And I didn't sleep like all night. And that day I had like stuff to do. And I took a nap for like 2 hours on my uncle's couch. And it was like I fell asleep, and 2 seconds later he was like, "Hey, wake up." And it was terrifying. Like, yeah. So I think I can really...
People do that all the time when they're driving and everything.
Yeah.
You know, just like blip out, and then you never blip up again.
you go to the cemetery or prison. There's no in between.
So yeah, he wakes up and the Morlocks are on him and everything like that. It's not described. It's very unclear about how the fire started exactly.
Honestly,
because
I think
the fire's behind him whenever it gets started, because he doesn't notice it.
Yeah,
it's behind. It's like pretty far behind him, and then it makes its way toward him. So maybe the Morlocks.
He's thinking that it's really dry and that, like,
an
it hasn't rained
for
a long time. So I'm thinking that, I don't know, maybe like one of the Morlocks like snatched something from him.
I don't think so.
Took it.
I think
no. His matches were gone. What if they like lit a match and like
they accidentally lit one?
Maybe one of the Morlocks like walked over and was like grabbing things, He's like covering his eyeballs, and he's like trying to grab things out of the fire.
Either way, the fire is started, which is very reminiscent of the last book we read.
Yeah.
Yes.
I like though how he wakes up and he's like, "Oh no, my fire's out," and then he's like, "Oh wait, here's this bigger fire. The entire forest is literally on fire."
Yeah. It's important to note that by this time, when he wakes up, Weena's not anywhere.
No, she was there. She was there.
And then he lost her in the fight.
She was next to his mace, and he tries to revive her. I think she passed out from the smoke, and then the Morlocks are attacking him more. So I think he is running away from them. He
lifted her, and she seemed to have fainted. So he put her on his shoulder and rose to push on, and
it's after that part.
Basically, this is when he gets lost.
Yeah.
So he gets turned around, and he does not know which way the Sphinx is. So he's lost his way, and he doesn't know which one. And it says he found himself in a cold sweat. So there's this fire going on. The Morlocks are like swinging from the trees and screeching and screaming. They're like kind of ready to attack him. And he's like, "Oh my gosh, how do I get out of here?" And this is such a blur, but I think that it honestly goes along with our like narrator's consciousness. So like, you know, how fast everything's going. Like this is like what's actually happening. Like, so I think it really does happen. So he puts her down on some turf. So it says a turfy bowl. I don't know what that means. So he puts her down very hastily because he needs to put a lump of camphor on something.
On the fire, right?
On the fire, yeah, because it said that it was waning, and he was collecting sticks.
Then he falls asleep. Then he wakes up. Then he fights. Then he loses Weena.
Yeah, because he I found it. So it looks like he's fighting them off, and he's just like trying to get them off of him, running around, doesn't know where he is, and so he loses Weena in that camp, and she was already passed out, so it's not like she's gonna leave the forest.
Yeah, and he says they start getting on him, and he felt his bones grind under the blow of his fist, so he starts fighting them.
Yeah,
and
dude.
he's
Going
like
hard,
punching them,
and he's killing some of them, which is awesome. I'm just like, yeah, like
good.
He's getting what he wants.
So he's smacking them off.
Which, like, as far as we know, there isn't any other apex predator in the environment. So.
No, and he's way bigger than them.
So there's a big point where it says like he tried to revive her and she lay like she was dead. So like he couldn't do anything for her. And then all of a sudden it was really dark, and the Morlocks had their hands upon me. Flinging off their clinging fingers, I hastily felt in my pocket for the matches. It had gone.
Yeah.
His matchbox was gone. So he was like screwed.
He's like, oh no,
and
my matches are gone.
He could feel the bitterness of death over his soul. So like he knew that he was like about to die, or felt like he was going to die, and he could feel little teeth nipping at his neck.
Ugh.
And then they all start running away, and he's like, I don't know what this is about.
And he said that he got his iron lever, he felt it, and he was like, it gave me strength. And so he starts destroying them.
What a beautiful way to describe such an emotional moment. Like, these are just like an adrenaline filled like
and I think
death experience.
The Morlocks snatched Weena. Because it says, like, he says, I knew that both I and Weena were lost, but I was determined to make the Morlocks pay for their meat. So, like, that I love that, because he was like, you're not going to get away from this for free. So he starts just beating them.
Maybe.
I like that, too.
Yeah. That was so amazing. I was like, yeah. Like,
man,
revenge.
the part where they're all, like, so they're all attacking him, right? And they're surrounding him, and then they all start running. And he's like, what's this about? Man, so much of this book has parts that remind me of the Lord of the Rings, because that reminded me of whenever they're in the Mines of Moria, and there's all those, like, goblins around them, and then the Balrog shows up, and so they all, like, run away.
Yeah.
I was just having intense Lord of the Rings vibes.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Man, it's the same.
And he said that he almost felt bad because he could see them burning up, and that they were like dying.
They're jumping into the fire.
He said he felt bad because he continues to hit them even though they're not even attacking him anymore.
Yeah, so he like stopped.
And he was like, I just stopped because they were gonna die anyway.
Yeah, they were just running into the fire.
Man, they're all just like scared of what's happening, and they're all like, oh no, and they're all trapped anyway. And he's like beating them still, and he's like, I feel like this is wrong.
Yeah.
Then he stops.
They were helpless, so like he was like, well, I was assured of their absolute helplessness and the misery in the glare, and I struck no more of them.
Except whenever one of them comes close to him, and then he knocks the shit out of him.
Yeah.
He's like, I won't kill any of them, and then one like charges next to him, and he's like,
but they're all blind anyway, so they're not even really trying to charge at him,
like
he's still beating them.
And in this whole time, he keeps looking for Weena, and it says over and over again, he's like, I'm looking for Weena, there's no sign of her. And so he's pretty sure that she is lost among the blaze, so she's been burned up too. So that's really sad. And he beat the ground with his hands, and he was like so upset that happened.
Yeah, and then the last of the chapter, he finds a few loose matches in his pocket, which is an important thing.
And that was the single like thing that he discovered that like brought hope back to him.
Yes. So he is just so sad. And he said that he was glad that she had burned up instead of them eating her. He said that it was a better fate anyway.
Yeah.
But he basically limped across all the smoking ashes and stuff, and you just see this guy like tore up, soot covered, his feet are bleeding, just like drudging out of the forest, just like, huh. and he just like collapsed, and he felt like how wretched he felt, and he just loses it, just falls on the ground like nothing. It's the worst. It's like, how do you keep going after that?
It's really sad.
Like, yeah, he's got severe
he lost
PTSD.
His one companion too.
Mm-hmm.
Is it at what point is it in which the time traveler remarks that he had not known what Weena meant to him until that moment?
Ooh,
he makes that
was like
that was a while ago.
Yes. I think that was like chapter 7 or 8.
Yeah.
Because it says that like she was so affectionate with him, and like how she would like caress him, and it said that he felt like that her love made her so much more human than the rest of them.
Mm-hmm.
And how much he cared about her, and that he had to bring her back after that because she meant so much to him. And I think like even if Weena like didn't even learn anything and was still like spaced and dorky, like he would still take her because she was the only thing that like represented human interaction to him, and he needed that, and so he bonded with her like pretty heavily. I don't blame him.
People even do that with dogs. So
yeah,
different animals.
And he passed out until morning, so he discovered some loose matches. No box, just the matches.
Yeah.
And like 4 of them, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
4 matches, 4 loose matches.
Yeah.
And so that brings us to chapter 10. The time traveler then makes his way to the same yellow metal seat covered in pink rust that he had sat on whenever he first came to this place in time. And he begins to think back on his arrival to this world and how wrong he had been about all his theories. And yet he theorizes again, as all intellects of his sort must do. Both the upper and underworlds had solved all issues and all problems, or so it seemed to him. Nature had been obliterated so that the top side was nothing but feebleness, and the underworld nothing but mechanism. He makes his way to the Sphinx after these thoughts and finds the doors ajar, to his surprise. He locates the time machine easily and then is promptly trapped inside. He narrowly escapes the Morlock's attack by time traveling to safety.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a really tiresome chapter. Like I feel tired. I felt tired reading this chapter. I was like, I felt as tired as he was.
Yeah.
So we have a bit of serenity whenever he sits on the yellow bench with the pink rust, because it's just a moment of reprieve for him to sit down and just do what he's always done, which is think about how things happen, you know. And so he tries to push the thoughts of Weena back into the back of his mind, and of all the terrible things that happened, and thinks in frustration again on how these series of evolutions occurred, and then he says, well, it's back to work. It's time to continue with my attempt to get my time machine back. And so he goes back to the Sphinx. The doors are open. These are massive doors too. So this is kind of a bit of a confusing thing. Like, we don't really know how these doors operate. They seem to be some sort of technology that he's not familiar with.
Yeah.
He said at the beginning they only open from the inside. But this is when I thought the Morlocks must be smarter than he thought originally. Because they left the doors open, right? And whenever he goes in, he says that the machine was cleaned and stuff.
Yeah, he said that basically, like, they couldn't help themselves because of the machine. Okay, they're so used to, like, greasing up the machines anyway.
Yeah.
Like,
but I thought, too, that they know how important it is to him. And so it's like, for an animal or something, setting a trap with this delicious piece of, like, food or something that looks so appetizing.
I think it's definitely both.
And so they know that this is important to him, so they clean it up. It's shiny, it's pristine, it looks like brand new again. And so they think that they'll draw him in better. And they're like setting this perfect trap for him, and they know exactly what they're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at the very least, they set a trap, and that in and of itself is definitely signs of higher intelligence. So
my favorite part that he talks about is how everything, like, human intellect had committed suicide. So he brings that in, and he basically said there's no unemployment problem, there's no social problem left to be unsolved, and so a great quiet had followed. So this great quiet had been the precipice for these creatures that he's seeing now today. Which I like to think about it like that. A great quiet, where you're not struggling against anything. This utopian world and stuff.
They had flawlessly separated themselves from nature, and nature stayed away for a while.
Yes.
And then when it crept back in, they became nature when it came back. So
it's just so intense, all the things that he's thinking, and just how heavy it is, because he's mourning the death of humanity. He knows it's gonna happen. And imagine living your entire life knowing that's how we're gonna end, that's what we're gonna devolve into. So it says Mother Necessity, who had been staved off for a few thousand years, came back again, and she began below. So Mother Necessity was the animal creatures, coming, the Morlocks coming to kill. I was like, oh, that's so cool. She'd been staved off, and it started from below. So they killed everybody.
Which is, from a psychoanalytical perspective, is very insightful, because nature started from below. Usually anything that's below is always referred to, obviously. Freud coined the subconscious. So especially in dreams or archetypal depictions in literature and art, anything that's below, like in Pinocchio, when you save your father from the belly of the whale, that's the unconscious, the subconscious. So nature started where it all began. So that portion of nature is all residing in each one of us. And apparently they had been able to destroy that somehow. So I guess that would, if we wanted to connect pretty far apart dots together, we could say that the Eloi don't have a really important part of the psyche.
I think so.
They're just animals, which isn't very favorable for Weena, because we like to personify her and everything. But it seems like they're indistinguishable from nature, which puts newfound value and weight on his statement whenever he says that they're cattle.
Yeah.
And it's terrible to think too, because he did think, his attempt to reach out with his humanity to the Morlocks is even more founded now, saying that they have the superior intellect. And we see now that they do, that they have the greater ability to at least strategize.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So
I know, it's crazy. He said, he was like, the panels are open, he walks in, and he hears them chuckle behind him. And he said, they're laughing, and they close. The doors close behind him. And he says, I was in the dark, trapped, or so the Morlocks thought. And that I chuckled gleefully, because he was like, you idiots, I'm about to zoom out of here.
Man, but they almost got him too.
They did.
Because they all
they
got all up
and
on him.
They ambushed him.
Oh yeah.
He realizes that the matches are the kind that only light on the box.
Yeah.
And he's like, crap, I'm screwed. So he has to feel his way in the dark, and they're trying to get the lever out of his hand, and he almost loses it.
He headbutts some of them.
And yeah, he headbutts one of them, and that's what it was like. He smashed his skull. He smashed his head into one of their skulls and felt it crack. And then he said that he put the lever in as fast as he could, and off he went, and he was still in full forward mode. So he just gets out of there. And it says
that was one of the moments that made my heart sink. Is that I was like, first of all, I was racing, because oh my gosh, the Morlocks are closing the doors, and I was like, oh, but he's good though, because he got a time machine. Those idiots. So I was on the same page with him.
Yeah.
And then he was like, the Morlocks were closing in. I was like, oh shit, that's not so good. And then he pulled out his matches, and I was like, yeah, bro, light those matches. These boys ain't gonna be able to see in a few seconds.
Yeah, it's so
and then he's like, but it was one of those. What did he call them?
They
He uses a really good word.
He says the matches were of that abominable kind that only light on the box.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it keeps like switching up with your
I related to that
emotions.
too because I hate those matches. Like I wish that I wish we still had Strike Anywhere matches.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh no, like, terrible. My heart just sank. I was like, he's gonna die.
Yeah. Keeps switching up on you because you're like. He sees the doors open in the time machine. You're like, oh, yay! And then the doors close. He's ambushed. Oh no!
Well, that's a classic storytelling. Like that's a classic heroic like journey. So like they use those micro transactions in storytelling all the time. They did this with, like they did an analytical example with Die Hard, where like different micro scenes were all like problem. Potential death, solution to potential death, and then they repeat that 4 times in one scene. So like the example was like Bruce Willis has almost falls out of a window. Like the problem is he's going to get blown up on the top level, so he uses the fire extinguisher to go down the side of the building. Problem, solution. And then when he's down there, he now has to get into the building. So he solved the problem. Had a problem, solved it, and then when he gets back through there, that heavy wheel breaks off and then drags him down. And now he has another problem and then a solution. We have like 4 of those within the span of like 30 seconds. So you see those 2 inside of the film is like, here's so many, like, good, no we're not. Yes, we're good. No, we're not.
Never mind.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's like it makes you ride on this roller coaster. It's so good.
And then he zooms away and he can see the gray, like that he described to them before. And he's zooming into the future.
He's only like half on the saddle though, so he's like leaning off.
Yeah, so I really do imagine just an actual like saddle, like Western saddle.
Yeah,
I just imagine him like holding on.
It's like when you start sliding off of like in bull riding or something, and he's like riding on the side of it and like still trying to steer it.
That'll always be one of the like the uncertain things. I'm excited to watch the movies that are coming up that we'll be doing next week because we'll get to see some actual conceptions.
I think it's just a saddle with a little.
I think I'm gonna be upset.
Yes,
yeah,
I agree. I think already I'm going into it. The book is gonna be better.
Someone needs to do a new one of this because I think that it could be so good. We have so much technology now, and they could really just like spice this up.
It could be terrifying. Too.
Yeah, they could make it like actually scared.
And it's a novella, so you can encapsulate the entire movie.
You can
in the
do
film.
everything, yeah, exactly.
They could do everything.
You don't have to leave anything out.
Oh man,
that'd be a great movie.
Let's make it.
So that was chapter.
Guys, let's make this a low budget movie.
Start a Kickstarter.
Okay, listen.
That was chapter 10, and now we will move on to the next 2 chapters, which are very small.
Very small.
So chapter.
And fast.
Very fast. Chapter 11. We'll start with chapter 11. Our narrator travels many, many years into the future yet again. This time encountering massive crabs and then a dark, eclipsed world with a football-sized tentacle creature. That is chapter 11.
Yes.
So why did we go from like giant crabs to like a tentacle creature that's only the size of a football?
He said it was like 1 million years in the future. So he says that he's going and he can see he could see the thousands meter, and it said it looked like fog to him, just flying in front of him, and it goes from thousands and then his millions meter is ticking.
Yeah, and he sees the sun getting closer and like more red.
Yeah, and it turns into this red giant. It's really hot. He says that he stops at one point and he's chilling there for a long time. And he sees these crabs. He's sitting there for a minute to take a break, and he's noticing the atmosphere is thin. He's having a hard time breathing, and these crabs are trying to attack him. And he said, "Oh, this was even more creepier than any Morlock." Okay, so he's sitting there watching them, just exhausted. Like, what is this world that we are living in? And these rocks, these kind of nasty world, and these crabs are crawling, and he says he feels like flies like tickling his face, and he's smacking them, and he reaches and he looks and he sees like one of the crab tentacles, and one's right behind him.
Antennae,
whatever. Right behind him, about to kill him, and he was like, ah! And he just like zoomed on his time machine.
I know, that was creepy too.
He's like, I just skipped a couple months ahead.
Yeah.
To get out of there. Oh gosh.
And then he encounters little tentacle creatures. Really not much to chapter 11.
Yes,
Pretty much the
It's
summarization is what happened.
Yeah. And basically at the very end of that is there's no life left on Earth. So he said that he saw a huge white butterfly thing. That was like while he saw the crabs. So at last more than 30 years hence, so like he's noticing that everything is dead, nothing's coming out of the sea, and it was quiet. So it said silent, it would be hard to convey the still of it. All the sounds of men, the bleating of sheep, the cries of birds, the hum of insects, the stir that makes the background of our lives, all of that was over. So like everything is dead, and he is there at the end of the world, like completely alone, like everything is dark. And well, I think this is after the sky had died, so the sun had died out long ago, so he said that it's like super black there.
Yeah, and the water is red.
And
then
I think the moon was gone.
Yeah.
Or the moon was gone. Yeah, and the sun is like, I guess, a giant.
It's just red.
Yeah,
it's just
red.
like dimmer, I guess.
If the sun does end up being a red giant, don't worry guys, we'll get engulfed by it, so don't worry. It's just like we
don't have to worry about that.
We don't even have to.
Yeah.
We won't even have to see it.
No, we won't
be alive.
We will
anywhere
not,
close to that.
Yes, I know, but I'm saying our
ancestors. That was one of my
Man, I don't
worries.
care about our ancestors.
That was one of the things that worried me with this, because I was like, how far does he expect? First of all, he already covered like the molecule problem, which is that if he encountered anything that like a physical mass that occupied the same time and space that he was attempting to travel to, that some terrible tragedy would unfold.
Yeah, where he just
explode or die or something terrible. He doesn't know.
Yeah.
But he covered that, so that's dangerous. But then I was worried about the fact that if he travels too far, in which he travels to the obliteration of the world,
to nothing, that he'll die then too.
Yeah. So like whatever caused the obliteration, whatever it was, he would meet that at some point immediately. Like he would be traveling like hundreds of thousands of years at a time within a second, and then he'd go
and then he would be gone. I thought about that too, like he would just go too far into the abyss and be nothing.
I think it would only be when he stopped though, because whenever he's traveling through time, he doesn't really exist. And so until he stops, that's when it would kill him.
See, and this is where we get into very complex science fiction type stuff, because we're like, well, if he doesn't exist in those spaces and time, or those times of space, right, then where does he exist?
I don't know, because it
Carl
seems like
Sagan
he's
might
like
say the fourth dimension.
He's like a mist.
He in the fourth dimension, that's what he's talking about. So he's traveling within the fourth dimension and not being touched by the other dimensions.
Right.
And so it's just when he lands.
Yes, because that's when he's affected by the other dimensions. Now, he's very fortunate that there's not just happens to be a tree growing exactly where his time machine is, because it lands in the same exact spot where it gets moved to. So I'm like, very fortunate that you didn't resurface back into a wall.
Well,
or what if he landed in the crab?
Question. There's another plot. There's a plot hole.
Yeah.
So he attempts to travel back in time. He would have had to move his time machine after he travels away from the Morlocks.
Oh yeah, he would be outside of his house.
Yeah, back to the position that he originally had.
No. This is mentioned.
It is.
Yes, it is.
Explain it.
Okay, so he says when he comes back. Is this in the... It might be in the next chapter, though. It might be in 12.
We're done with 11.
Okay, so that was chapter 11. This is chapter 12. The traveler manages to return to his own time. He eats his meal of meat, as was described in the first beginning chapters, and recounts his adventure to his guests, tying his story together full circle. The guests go home in disbelief. The psychologist, right, is the guy who is also narrating?
I don't think they ever mention what he is.
The guy that's narrating, I think it's H.G. Wells, though.
Yeah,
That's
technically him. Yeah.
The psychologist, or H.G. Wells, returns the next day to find the time traveler's laboratory empty, accepting the supposed time machine. The two of them have a small interaction, ending with the both of them agreeing to wait 30 minutes for him to return. He's going to leave. And we also find out at this point that the time traveler's name is Richardson.
No, Richardson is a different person.
No,
Who's Richardson?
He never says it the whole time.
Whatever. This is not true.
Richardson is a different person.
Who is Richardson?
He is. He says, then suddenly I was reminded by an advertisement that I had promised to meet Richardson, the publisher, at 2.
Oh,
yes. So
Richardson is someone else.
You were speed reading. It wasn't.
Maverick.
He actually says to his housekeeper, he was like, "Where's Mr.?" And it goes blank again, so you never hear the scientist's name.
I thought I misunderstood because it said, "At that I understood. At the risk of disappointing Richardson, I stayed on, waiting for the time traveler, waiting for the second."
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So at the risk of disappointing the guy he made an appointment
he still stayed. Yeah.
So
what were you saying though about it landing?
Okay. So he's explaining how his time machine. So I'm thinking his lab is pretty big, like a big old room, and it's kind of at the center of the room at the get-go. He says that it was moved to the Sphinx, and hold on, let me see. He says that he returned and he could see.
Right, you would know the exact distance, right? Yeah.
He's talking about returning, and he sees Mrs. Watchett. Mm-hmm. And he said before he could see her zooming around, but it was forward. This time he could see her moving backwards.
Which is interesting.
Everything's materializing around her. And it says, let me see if I can find it. Then I stopped the machine and saw about me the old familiar laboratory. So he's all happy that he saw it. And then, and yet not exactly. So he said everything was as it should be, and yet not exactly. The thing had started from the southeast corner of the laboratory. It had come again to rest in the northwest, again against the wall where you saw it. That gives you the exact distance from my little lawn to the pedestal of the white sphinx into which the Morlocks had carried my machine. So he... Oh,
man, good for him that the laboratory's big.
Yes.
Yeah. At this point in the story, he literally takes all of them to go and see it. And they do go and look at the thing. And the whole time everybody's like, no, like, whatever. And if someone had told me the story, I'd be like, you know what? You could not have made this up. Like, I know H.G. Wells made it up. Or did he? But
honestly, I can believe their skepticism, because if someone had told me that, I don't know if I would believe them either.
But, I mean, I'd be like, no, take me. If you had seen something disappear in front of you, and then he's telling you this wild story, I'd be like, take me on your time machine. Let's go somewhere. I'd be like, saddle up, boy. Like, let's go.
Right.
I would go with him. I'd be like, I don't care.
Why not?
Life is too short. I'd be like, I don't even.
Man, I would not. I'd be like, I have things to do. I can't
like,
do this.
First of all, take me back to the Renaissance. Like, let's go visit this person. Let's go kill Hitler. Zoom.
I wouldn't kill anybody. I just exist. I just coexist.
I don't know if I would want to
experience
it.
You wouldn't go back in time and kill Hitler.
I know, because
that's kill Hitler.
I feel like the course of action that history took, because he killed himself, is the way that life was supposed to go.
Well, I just think that, like, there's no boundaries to evil.
No, I'd go find baby Hitler in the cradle.
I don't think there's no boundaries to evil. So, like, if you were to just, like, snuff out the most evil person that you can conceive of within your lifetime, then you would just make it way for another one. True. It doesn't matter. Like, and
True.
This is you as far as time travel goes, you just risk screwing so many things up. Like the butterfly effect, like good luck.
Yeah, that's
They
true.
don't even touch on that in this.
They don't, but he's only in the future, so like how much butterfly effect I mean, he's obviously damaging the future.
Yeah,
like,
but he's not gonna experience
he's not going to
it, so
experience
it doesn't really
it,
matter.
so it doesn't matter. Yeah,
Yeah.
so he's not going to have much of a butterfly experience effect for the. Maybe I would go to the future.
You'd have to.
honestly.
I think I would only go the future, but not to my future, and I would not go the past.
I would just
Because I don't want to know how I die. I don't want to know anything about my life. I'd rather just see way in the future.
That's a good decision. Yeah, good decision.
Oh my gosh. I would,
Because haven't you seen American Dad when Roger can touch people and like know when they die
Tell
or
him,
have
yeah.
and like it ruins their lives, so no thanks.
That was I think that was the premise of one of the Rick and Morty episodes. We're in a Rick and Morty t-shirt,
when,
guys.
Morty gets that crystal and he's in that in the court, and he's like every sentence he's saying, he's like, I am.
He's trying,
and he sees himself dying, and then he tries to do
the crystal allows him to see what he wants in his future, or like what's in his future, and he sees this vision of him with that high school girl that he has such a big crush on.
Yeah.
And she's like at his deathbed, like loving on him, like I love you, Morty. Our life together has been so good. And he's like, I die with her. And so he just micromanages every single thing that he does in the world to try and
even when he
maintain the crystal vision so that vision will stay
even
in
when
his
he
head.
like is constructing sentences, he'll like make a noise, and if like it'll change from him dying with that girl to him being like hit by a car and like dying or like
everything
being stabbed
changing.
or something, and so he'll be like constructing his sentences by doing that. He'll be like like trying to make a sentence.
If I had a time machine right now, I just want to get past this whole coronavirus business. I'm sick of it.
Bro.
I'm so over
I was actually slightly distracted during the show because I was just like, I hate coronavirus.
I hate it.
I'm pretty sure everyone does.
So this is a wonderful part of the book that I want to read the ending sentences here.
Oh man, it's so good.
It's
It's so
gutted
sad.
me.
Do y'all have the epilogue?
I have it.
Okay, good.
Do you want me to read the epilogue?
I have the epilogue.
Yes, the epilogue
Okay.
is super good. Oh wait. This is mentioned, right? In the epilogue okay. We have to finish out chapter 12.
Yes.
So he goes.
So this is we're finishing chapter 12. So
Yes.
I think it's so good I want to read a portion of it though.
Okay.
Do it.
So they basically agree that the time traveler is going to leave and that he's going to wait for them for 30 minutes. And so that is basically what happens. A big whoosh happens. The time traveler takes off.
And he sees it.
And he sees it. And he's still maybe not believing entirely what he just saw.
Yeah.
But he's beginning to realize. And so he says that I felt an unreasonable amazement. I knew that something strange had happened, and for the moment could not distinguish what the strange thing might be. As I stood staring, the door into the garden opened, and the manservant appeared. We looked at each other. Then ideas began to come. Has Mr. So-and-so gone out that way? Said I. No, sir. No one has come out this way. I was expecting to find him here. At that I understood. At the risk of disappointing Richardson, I stayed on, waiting for the time traveler, waiting for the second, perhaps still stranger story and the specimens and photographs he would bring with him. But I am beginning to now fear that I must wait a lifetime. The time traveler vanished 3 years ago, and as everybody knows now, he has never returned.
That is amazing.
I think he died.
I think he's just skipping through time. I don't think he died. I don't think he wanted to come back. Why would you want to come back to your little menial existence after literally soaring through the cosmos like that?
He was so terrified of
He
most
came
of
back
it.
once.
Yeah,
Maybe
that's
just to get
true.
back some stuff, that he needed maybe, and then he was off again. But like that, when I read that, I was gutted.
That he never came back.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Like and the fact that he waited that long for him, he's been waiting 3 years. like off and on to just like come back to his house for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Like I was like, oh.
Honestly, yeah, I'd be so mad that I found out time travel was real, and 2, that he didn't take him with me. I'm like, I hate you.
That.
What am I supposed to do with this information now? I can't do anything with it.
If time traveling existed, I do not think
I would dive into his like notes, into his like lab work.
Yeah.
He took all of it?
The laboratory is empty. Doesn't even say where he went. What happened with
Dang.
it? It was just like whenever he got there, he said the only thing that was in the laboratory was the machine.
Gosh, it was awful.
So he may have left somewhere. He may have. Here's a theory. He may have taken all of his equipment back to the Morlock land.
Well, I heard that there is
Maybe
a
he
sequel
goes back to
of this book, and he goes back and saves Weena.
Maybe he like dips in.
That is
right
a
at the last
possibility.
second
He could do that.
Yeah.
But then he has to interact with himself.
No, he goes.
Oh, he goes
can't
to
remember
before
when
he comes to there.
Or he goes like into the. I don't remember what it was, but he goes like into the forest or something, and he saves her, and then he comes back 3 years later, and she dies again. So he cannot save her.
No.
It's like the show Heroes. Have you guys seen that show?
Is it good?
Yes. It's so good.
Oh my gosh.
But this character goes back in time to try and save this girl that just died. And he's like trying to save her. And she tells him that she has a brain tumor and she'll die in 6 months whenever she actually dies. But she's murdered. But he's like, I couldn't save her anyway. And that's what it feels like. Whack.
Boring.
Would you like to read the epilogue?
Okay. Okay. One cannot choose but wonder. One cannot choose but wonder. Will he ever return? It may be that he fell back into the past and fell among the blood-drinking, hairy savages of the age of unpolished stone, into the abysses of the Cretaceous Sea, or among the grotesque saurians, the huge reptilian brutes of the Jurassic times. He may even now, if I may use this phrase, be wandering on some plesiosaurus-haunted oolitic coral reef, or beside the lonely saline links of the Triassic Age. Y'all try to say that 5 times fast.
Yo, good job.
Or did he go forward into one of the nearer ages in which men are still men, but with riddles of their own time answered and its wearisome problems solved? Into the manhood of the race, for I, for my own part, cannot think that these latter days of weak experiment, fragmentary theory, and mutual discord are indeed man's culminating time. I say for my own part, he, I know, for the question has been discussed among us before the time machine was made, thought but cheerily of the advancement of mankind, and saw in the growing pile of civilization only a foolish heaping that must inevitably fall back upon and destroy its makers in the end. If that is so, it remains for us to live as though it were not so. But to me, the future is still black and blank, is a vast ignorance lit at a few casual places by the memory of his story. And I have by me, for my comfort, 2 strange white flowers, shriveled now, brown, flat, and brittle, to witness that when even the mind and the strength had gone, gratitude, a mutual tenderness still lived on in the heart of man.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
The end.
Hey, maybe he traveled to the year 2020 and died of coronavirus.
Oh my gosh. So he keeps the flowers.
What a brilliant ending.
I know.
I love the epilogue too.
I like the epilogue. It's
nice.
so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he keeps it and he remembers it. And he's like, well, I like to think that the future is still blank. Like, it's still being written. So he likes to think about not what the time traveler tells him, but he's still holding on to the flowers and remembering him in the story. So I think that he's the only one out of all these intellectuals to believe him.
Yeah. The only truly open individual.
Mm-hmm. Oh gosh, what a great book.
It was wonderful.
It was
really
such a pleasant experience. We came out of Lord of the Flies just damaged. Like, ugh. What was that? Like, it's like, have you seen the Rick and Morty episode where they're like, oh God, and they're like crying.
They
like,
get into the spaceship and they're like, ah, and they just burst into tears and like, woe is me and sobbing and everything. Yes. Yeah, that was it after Lord of the Flies. But this one was a treat. This was a candy of a book, you know. Mm-hmm. It really is. And it's not a cheap one either. I mean, it's not just some cheap experience. I mean, it was a genuine, like, ride.
It was so rich.
It makes you think a lot. It's deep, and it's still short, and it has, like,
good action.
Yes, it has aspects of like a fun adventure book, but it also has introspective parts.
It doesn't have romance. It doesn't even need that.
Love it.
It doesn't have.
But it does rely on like one of the other core subjects, which is death.
Yeah, true.
You can't get away with that.
You can't get away from the archetypes, but I think it was just what a solid story.
Yes.
And how this story has influenced so many other like things that we watch today. So we have it, like, think about Interstellar and how they talk about how gravity is like one of the fourth dimensions and how that can be manipulated, and Mr. Nobody, how it talks about like being able to flip through time so easily and just how important all that stuff is. So it really has influenced our pop culture. It's whether we like to know it or not. Like, we don't really think about it, but just the basically very smart scientist who figures all this stuff out, who's patronly, kind of like a father-like figure, very intelligent, very like problem solving. Like, it's all immortalized in this story, and we see it time and time again. This story is retold and retold and retold, whether we realize it or not, because it's got some really good pseudoscience in it that like blows you away. It relies heavily on theories in evolution. It really relies it kind of uses like modern sciences that we know of today, and it is just crazy. Like a lot of psychology in there too. So
tons. Well, psychology is in all literature almost.
H.G. Wells must have been a genius. His name is Herbert George. If you didn't know, that's why I went by H.G. because Herbert is a bad, ugly name.
Probably not too bad during his time. There's another thing I think is cool just to remind people, like probably every time we finish a book that's this good, is that, like you say, it was like the thing that highly influenced all of our science fiction going forward from the time that it was published and was digested by all of its people. And we've unconsciously taken in everything that has come before us. And I think it was, here's a quote from, I guess it was, I don't know what it was, but it just, everything, it was in Fight Club, Chuck Palahniuk. He says everything is a copy of a copy of a copy.
Yes.
And it says in Ecclesiastes 1:9, it says, "The thing that hath been, it is that which shall be, and that which is done is that which shall be done, and there is no new thing under the sun." And so that's like pretty much what one of my like driving themes in my life is. And then there's another one. What is it? Mark Rabier. Do you watch Mark Rabier? He's like a live music DJ guy that wears a robe and stuff. Very similar vibes to me, or I have similar vibes to him. He has a nice mustache.
Oh my god!
And he has this song called "Another Idea," and one of his interlude monologues is, "It doesn't matter what you do out there. No one cares about your creative integrity." He says, just get out there and get in front of your shit and make stuff, you know? No one cares whether you're original or not, because you can't be. There's no possibility. Like, it's impossible. Everything that has been done will be done again. And so if you think that what you're creating is of your own original intellect, sorry to tell you, but it's not.
You're wrong.
Yeah, you're wrong. So but that doesn't mean you can't be brilliant and bring new life to things. Like, we talk about Interstellar and all kinds of other like science fiction novels that are reminiscent of of what we can see as the first major example of great science fiction concerning time travel.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that there is novels that we haven't read or know about that predate this.
Yeah, I honestly feel like it's such a conglomeration of all of his education that has produced this. So like whenever people get like real nasty with me about having my degree has taught me so much. My college education has taught me so much about the world and how things work and how everything like coincides. So when people say like, oh, you got liberalized at college or something like that, but I'm like, no, I really learned how society function and how different things work. And I put my moral lens on that. So I think that's how like education and things like that are so important, because they create novels, they create books, they create theories, they create I mean, education is like our core identity. So I think that is like it's just a big chunk of his intellect just poured in there, and I think that's just, it encapsulates, it's a Horcrux, encapsulates his soul and into it. So everything that H.G. Wells has ever learned, just all in that novel.
Yeah, it's a really good. I think it's great, and I think we should all aspire, especially as like educational participants, to like, if not strive for his level of action in the literature world, just to take it in.
Yeah.
You know, and spread it to other people.
And to acknowledge it. Yeah.
Yeah. And just enjoy it for what it is.
I think it's really important that we read this book. I mean, there's some books that I'm like, man, life is short. I'm not going to read books that like I don't enjoy.
Yeah. That's why when we create the list, we have a very strict criteria and guidelines for what books we can read, not only with 300 pages or less. So if you want to suggest a book to us, we'll just tell you now. If you can suggest books to us, we would like you to do so, and do it in the comments and everything. Suggest a book that is 300 pages or less, is considered classical in some manner, which is subjective, but mostly not. I mean, like if Penguin House produces it and they're like calling it a classic, then it's probably a classic. Yeah. Okay, we're first of all not going to argue that with you. We're not gonna, your niche book that you think is classic, we're not, we're sorry. And then it also we would like it to have at least one movie adaptation. But if it doesn't, then it would just cut it a day short on our run. And that's not too big a deal, because I do like the faster turnover on the books. Yes. Unless of course we got into a really good book, so we just have to decide communally what we want to do about that. I might once I'm done with I'm doing solo conversations about Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. Once I'm done with that, I might just undertake the huge deal of trying to go through the Game of Thrones series, A Song of Ice and Fire.
Ooh. By myself. Man, we should do a review of the show.
Of the show? Yeah. Oh yeah, that would be great.
Or we just watch it. Oh my gosh.
Let's watch it on stream.
No. Honestly, I have this great idea where we just all watch Lost, and we're just like coming every episode like, what's going on?
I love Lost.
I've never seen it.
It's great.
If you like Heroes, you'll like Lost.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's Lost is,
man, guys, watch Heroes.
Like Lost in a little while is gonna be a classic. Like it's one of those. Well, it's a classic television show. It really is.
I know.
It's gonna be like Bonanza.
What show was
Little Joe?
Have you guys seen the episode of The Simpsons where Homer discovers Lost? He buys a treadmill and it has a TV on it, and he discovers Lost, and so he gets a chair and puts it on his treadmill and just watches Lost.
Yes.
If I watch Lost on a treadmill, you watch me get so skinny.
Yes, exactly.
He puts a chair on it and he just sits on the treadmill.
Yo, I watched Lost in 3 weeks.
Yeah.
All of it.
How many
it was in like the
episodes
summer. Oh, like a ton. It was like 13 seasons.
Hey, but I watched
each like 9 episodes or more.
With my dad, I watched all 7 seasons of Game of Thrones in 7 days.
That's and it's
10 hours a day or 11.
I watched it with Skylar, and it was just it just blew me away.
Oh, it was great. It was really great.
That's a classic. However, it ended.
Yeah, the books are better.
It ended so badly.
The books are much better.
I'm just like, I think this book, I mean, as much as I'm disappointed, I think there's no greater end for the time traveler.
No, there's not. I mean, it's a wonderful, bitter, mildly sweet.
Honestly, wouldn't all his friends believe him if he disappeared and they'd be like, well, where'd he go?
You'd be
like,
surprised.
Nobody knows.
I doubt they'd believe him. They'd just vanish. They'd be like, that's convenient.
That's true.
Right?
Oh, yeah. Like Carol Baskin's husband. That's convenient. Carol Baskin, this is for you.
All right. Well, I think this was wonderful. We appreciate you guys coming with us on this journey. We will do next week, hopefully, a live conversation. If not, then we'll get a recorded one out to YouTube and everything. Yeah. I'll be uploading this also to Twitch as a premiere so that it will premiere at some point for you guys to watch. So we apologize for not being able to be with you guys in live time and talk with you and chat. But it just wasn't an option tonight, and we wanted to stay on schedule. So
it is what it is.
It is what it is. Gotta do what you gotta
do. All at once.
Corona.
It is what it is.
The coronavirus has really thrown a wrench into all kinds of things. So we're honestly lucky to just be able to be here doing this
and being healthy
at all and being healthy. Yeah. We already lost one. We got Doodle Ren here.
We don't even know.
So,
we don't know if he has corona.
We don't know if Doodle Ren is a reoccurring person.
And if he does have corona, I hope he just stays in his house.
Is this 6 feet? Are we 6 feet apart?
Yes.
I feel like I'm
Who's over there? I'm safe.
Yeah.
Bye, guys.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm a safe distance away from Ren's chair.
First of all,
last week.
It's a viral thing, so it's always in the air.
Yeah, you can't
escape
within like 50 feet.
It's always in the air anyways.
I've already had anxiety about it all week. I'm going to try not to worry about it.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's not a big deal. I think it's okay. So we're tired now. We're going to end our recording.
All right. Goodbye, guys.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you tomorrow. We're drawing for the books next week.
Yes.
We're comparing the movies. We're comparing 2 movies. We haven't decided which movies. We'll announce those on social media. So be sure to follow us. And we'll be drawing for the new book. So suggest the books and watch the movies. And we will see you guys later. This has been the Fall Book Club. My name is Maverick Evans, and I love you guys so much. We'll see you.
Signing off.